Mary, you want to, thank you. Okay, you want to read the remote?
Yes, so good afternoon. This open meeting of the Town Area Plan Work Group is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, is being held by video conference. The meeting is being recorded. All attendees are participating via Zoom, is posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. And anything you share may be captured by the recording, so please take care to silence your phones and other devices and not to share your screen. Henry, you want to do a roll call?
Sure. I'm here. Mary Longacre,
Here.
Lee Saperstein,
Here.
Mary Ann Easley,
Here.
Marcia Fader, Reagan Horchow, Allison King, Nikki Rowland,
Here.
and Liz. I don't think it's going to make it, but all right. Everybody happy with the agenda? Any changes? Okay, good. Okay, can I have the approval of the draft minutes from February 1st, please?
So moved.
Mary, is there a second?
Mary Ann.
Mary Ann, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any discussion, opposition? Good, passes. Right. Mary Ann, you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
I know. Thank you. It's all yours.
Okay, so Liz and I took on the land use plan and she prepared a preliminary written report. And it's a fairly brief one, so I'm gonna kind of walk through it. And so the goal of our subcommittee is to identify the present use of land in the town area. And if we see any needed changes, to propose those. So we have to consider striking a balance between vitality and also historic integrity. And we want to protect the residential life while recognizing that many sections of the town area are really already built out to capacity. So there isn't a lot of opportunity for additional building. And we want to consider public versus private uses, population density, building intensity, and any land that's currently available and might be under consideration for planning facilities. So with that,
Mary Ann, for the purpose of the minutes, two quick questions. You've gone through that fairly quickly. Is that in a script somewhere? And part two is, did you submit the land use plan draft earlier that I can refer to when I assemble the minutes?
Liz submitted that.
Okay,
And I'm just kind of using that as a skeleton and walking through it, so.
good, okay.
And am I going too fast? Is that a problem?
Not if what you're describing is in the draft land use plan. I'll pick it up from there.
Okay, yes, it is. So now let me get to the really interesting subject of zoning. This is something that we had Leslie Snell as a guest at one of our meetings so that she could walk us through what their thinking is regarding zoning, and that is replicated in our own report. So probably the most significant thing is that they have done away or are doing away with the zoning category called R1, which maybe one or two of you will even have any idea what that is, but anything that was R1 is now going to be rezoned to be either residential old historic, ROH, or else R5 or R5L. And the only noticeable thing about those zoning categories are, they're all 5,000 square foot lots, essentially. And they're just eliminating this old category and designating each of the properties that was in that category into one of the new ones. And they don't even have a deadline for accomplishing this. So who knows how long that will take. And Liz and I even considered maybe we should go property by property that is now R1 and come up with a suggestion for each property of how we think it should be designated, but that's something yet to be answered, to tell you the truth. And not to forget, any zoning changes are going to have to go to town meeting. So for quite a number of years, I think this is all just going to be proposals. One of the significant things about this is some of those lots that have to be redesignated are historic. And one of those is Marcia Fader's on Liberty Street. So her property is one of those that's currently got historic structures on it, but is not in the old historic district. So that's another consideration. Another reason for us to go property by property and give some suggestions, or else select some properties out that we think we really do have an opinion about and we want to, we would like to make sure they understand our position on it. I just want to mention ground cover, because one of the things that changes that they've made at the plus is they've reduced the ground cover from 50 to 40%. And we should all know that pools are not considered part of ground cover. And I was never party to how that decision was made, but I'm not sure that I agree with that. I don't know if our committee agrees with that. Here are the areas that we as a committee might want to affect. One of them is building height. There are buildings in our town area and they're historic buildings, there are modern buildings. Some of them are 30-foot high, and we might want to consider limiting future buildings to 25 feet, which is something they've done in the Sconset Historic District. So just for less massiveness of buildings, we may want to suggest a height limit. As you probably know, pools are currently, there's a moratorium on them in the Old Historic District, the residential Old Historic District. And as far as spas and hot tubs go, there are 3 warrant articles that are on the warrant for the town meeting that's coming up. So we may want to take a position on spas and hot tubs as well. And I think the last thing that I want to mention is the commercial and mixed use, which is a very few locations in our area. Just an example is the knitting shop on Orange Street. And then there's another consignment shop on North Liberty Street, which is not in use for commercial purposes, but I think they're just keeping it as kind of a placeholder for a possibility if they would like to make it a commercial venture. So that is sitting there as well. So that's about as far as we've gotten in terms of land use at this point. As I see it, there are 3 issues in the town area, and those are noise, parking, and traffic. Those seem to be the biggest issues of all. And in terms of preserving our neighborhood, those are issues that we ought to be looking at. And finally, I want to mention wetlands, because there are some wetlands in the town area. And I don't think we do an adequate job of protecting those. We really need to be forceful about protecting those. And I myself know of issues where people have actually taken out part of a wetland to make a parking space. So that is illegal, but it has happened. So I guess that's a summary of what we've done so far.
Great, thank you.
Any comments? Lee?
Now, this is a general one, but I get the feeling that as we get these working reports, that somewhere in the next month or two, we should start considering our positions and our recommendations. In other words, taking the working report, digesting what we've learned, and then making something a little firmer. Because Marianne certainly gave us an indication of things that we might consider as a position.
Yeah, I guess I just want to make a comment too about noise, because noise keeps coming up, especially with these pools and spas. And always the noise that's talked about is, you know, children screaming or adults who are drunk screaming. And I think actually the bigger noise problems are equipment, air conditioners, pool and spa equipment, amplified music, outdoor TVs, leaf blowers, really equipment, not people. And I guess I'd like to see our committee make some recommendation on those, because our area is so densely populated that noise is just, it's expanded. It's not like, it's just double or triple what it would be if there were more space around people who were causing the noise. And I just noticed a generator, you know, when we lost power recently, one of my neighbors has a generator and I can hear the generator a quarter mile away. And I thought, okay, one generator, fine. But what if a half dozen people in the neighborhood got generators? Not only would I be sitting there without electricity, but I would be going out of my mind from the noise. So
I think you have a really good point, Marianne, that a lot of the chatter is about people making noise, but equipment is a much more significant issue. I mean, people are not mute. People talk, people laugh, you know. I had to really cringe at the person who complained about, hearing children playing. That's what children do. So, but I think you have an excellent point about the proliferation of equipment noise, and that is something that can be addressed much more easily and fairly than trying to restrict people making noise.
thank you.
So, Mariana, I'll preface this by a quick definition, and that this is actually a formal definition. Noise is unwanted sound, period. And so in Nantucket, we do have a fairly substantial noise ordinance. And one of the challenges is enforcement is a function of complaint. We don't have a noise inspector. We don't have anybody going around with sound pressure level meters checking. The impact of noise has been studied very carefully. I'll give you one of the little factoids that I picked up. In general, the noisiness of a neighborhood is reflected by building prices. So if you take two houses of equal size, condition, and lot size, and one's against the highway and the other's not, guess which one is more valuable? And surveys have been done that way. So coming back to your point, let me try and be a little bit more specific. Do we recommend that the town hire a noise enforcement officer, or do we recommend that the bylaw be enhanced to forbid, for example, gasoline-powered leaf blowers and hedge trimmers, substituting all electrical ones, which is a burden on the landscapers because then they have to buy new equipment. So I will look forward to your consideration of enforcement versus bylaw change?
Well, I know about the leaf blowers, but I don't know enough about equipment, but let's just take pool equipment. I assume there's pool equipment that is less noisy and some that is more noisy. And I'm just wondering if when you're speccing a new pool, that the town can require that they purchase the less noisy equipment versus the very noisy equipment, if the pool is in town where it's already densely populated and the noise is much more vibrant. And I'll tell you, the generator just totally freaked me out because I've heard the generator at the Nantucket Bank down on Orange Street when we've lost power. And that was the first one I thought, oh my God, how long can a person be even near this? And now that there's one in my neighborhood at a house, I just can't even imagine half a dozen of these things going off when we lose power. Whew.
So I can think of two possible ways to regulate that. One is, as you said, some sort of certification about the equipment, operating at a certain noise level or below. But the other would be, whenever this equipment is installed, presumably there's some kind of inspection sign off. And, we could, I'm hoping, require that the equipment be inspected while running for noise to see if it is installed in such a manner as to meet whatever, standard we have for noise, from 10 feet away or 20 feet away or a quarter mile away, but certainly having a certification or inspection program is much more proactive than waiting for somebody to complain or than waiting for 100 people to complain before any action is taken.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. And I think that what is specified for a dense neighborhood can be different from what's specified for a neighborhood where the lots are much bigger and there's more space around people and equipment.
The interesting thing on that one, Marianne, is the degree of ambient or background noise. A spike in noise is less intrusive if its excursion from the background is small. So that spike may measure a substantial sound pressure level, which is only a few decibels louder than the ambient. Whereas in the neighborhoods where you've got the big houses and a quiet background, that spike may be noticeable for hundreds, if not thousands of yards.
Well, it's a complicated issue, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Lee, have you still got your generator?
Oh, I do. It's broken and Tim's coming by tomorrow to look at it.
Was there any kind of noise regulation with that?
No.
Okay.
Did it fit within the back property line offset? That was the issue.
But you can hear it when it goes on, can't you?
Yeah, that's how come I knew to call the repairman.
Well, it's noisy, isn't it?
It's substantial, yes. It's a 4-cylinder Ford engine. And the muffler that's on it is not nearly as comprehensive as what was underneath my Escape when I had a 4-cylinder Ford engine that drove a car. So they can be silenced. It's a function of what the manufacturer wants to put into it.
Or can't you build an enclosure for many kinds of equipment, generators, pool equipment, and that would go a long way towards muffling the sound, I would think.
Yes, and they are, but nonetheless, remember the exhaust has to come out through the enclosure. And so there is a pipe for sound to escape.
Yeah, I can't think of a good way to regulate this except by just stipulating that certain types of equipment can't be above a certain decibel level. You know, but still, I don't think you need a permit to install a generator. So that has to be kind of, I don't know how you regulate that when there's not a permit to get signed off on.
You
Not
need
even
an
an
electrical
electrical
one.
permit?
Well, an electrical permit, I'm not sure that the electrician necessarily needs an electrical permit to, I mean, maybe they do. And that would be a perfect place to catch that. But a lot of electricians just, you know, they'll just do, you know, odd work here and there without getting permits, if, you know, if it's
Well,
retrofitted on.
I think Mickey reports justly about what is, but we could recommend what should be in the future, and that may include some kind of enforcement, not enforcement, regulation for permitting.
I think we could identify certain types of equipment like a generator, air conditioning units, the condensers, and pool equipment, although there shouldn't be too much pool equipment going in the future.
Yeah.
But I think we could identify those specific noise-making equipment and create some guidelines around those.
When I write this up, I'll do a little homework. I used to know the words very well. When the EPA enforces its requirements for the environment, they talk about best available and best practicable. I may have it right. Best available means no matter what the cost, you get the best, in this case, environmental control equipment on a power plant. But if the standard is best practicable, then you're allowed to do a little bit of shopping and in the permit application suggest what you're going for. So I'll wrap that into the minutes, and it allows us to recommend one choice or another over what such a permit should look like.
Yeah, and I would make it specific to, you know, installed equipment, so not itinerant equipment like a leaf blower. I think that.
Oh, I understand.
category.
Stationary equipment.
So another thing that Mary Ann mentioned earlier was the changing R1 to R5. And R5, there, you know, when that happens, R1 is currently regulated at 30% ground cover, and R5 is 40%. So whenever that happens, it creates the ability for people to increase the size of their homes. So that does have an effect. It's not just a technical issue. There is a result. Same with ROH, I think is 40% also.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
But I think the R5s are limited to one building on the lot.
Oh, R5L.
Oh, okay. So I guess that building could be enlarged, but it just can't add a second building.
Anything else?
It's good stuff.
Thank you, Mary Ann. That was really, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh, I'm in love with zoning now.
I can report a little bit on the business subcommittee. Allison and I did meet, and we were able to get the list of businesses that the chamber has from the WPI project last year, to try and identify, you know, which businesses are actually within our area, and, you know, what kinds of businesses. So I think Allison has been working on that. And we had some interesting discussions with Karen McCumber from the chamber one of the issues was for businesses to be successful. Most businesses in our area would want internet for any kind of work from home or professional occupation. But Karen also said cell service is necessary. And that hadn't even occurred to me. Of course, cell service at my house is terrible. And if I were using my cell phone to conduct business, yes, I would want better cell service. And so that is something that we might put in our plan, is to find some way to improve cellular coverage in the area, for the enjoyment of the residences as well as for the success of businesses.
Aren't they putting up new, I don't want to say transmitters, but isn't there a project going on right now?
They're antennas. So just as another little factoid, when it was proposed to put an antenna on top of the Baptist church, which is now the Summer Street Ecumenical Church, the telephone company paid for the steeple, providing they could tuck an antenna inside of it. Now, having that just as a trivial pursuit fact does suggest that if we recommend antennae, that they respect the historical nature of the town.
So do we have a map of the island that designates where cell service is least efficient and most efficient? We have any idea of that?
I think if you asked individuals, they'd all say it's terrible where I am, no matter where they are.
I don't have any complaints. That's why I'm
Okay.
asking.
I'm not sure that that's available. I think the cell carriers have their own maps, but all it indicates is coverage or no coverage, and they get very generous with their definition of coverage. So I'm not sure that information is available, partly because the cell phone companies don't want to provide it. They don't want to admit whether they're not successful. And partly because it's sort of proprietary. Each company has their own thing. I don't know who monitors it. Maybe the FCC would monitor it. I don't know. That's an interesting question. The other thing is that the town has no control whatsoever over additional antennas. We can, as we said, we can enforce historic aspects, but we can't make anybody put one in.
Now, on the other part of your report, how many businesses did you find that are in our town area where our map is?
I don't have the results yet for that. I think
Oh,
Alice is
okay.
working on that.
That'll be interesting.
One of my thoughts was the way it works now, a business can exist if it has always existed at that spot, even if the zoning would not currently allow it. So it's, as they say, grandfathered in, or by right, I think is the preferred term now. But if that business is interrupted for whatever reason, that right disappears. So a new owner or the same owner after a hiatus cannot put a business in, and a business of a different type cannot be put in either, if I'm saying that all correctly. So one of my ideas was to try and loosen that restriction, to say, for instance, if a business existed at this location in the past, we would allow it to resume. Or if a business of a certain kind existed in this area in the past, we would welcome the reestablishment of that kind of business in that area. So essentially being less restrictive about business use, because the residential old historic area, sure, it's residential, but it also has a very long history of business use, and we've lost a lot of those businesses.
Yeah, we did discuss this, and I'm not sure with whose report, but we did discuss it earlier. And I mentioned that Nantucket in earlier times was a walking community I mean, people actually walk to Sconset. And that's why what we would today call convenience stores were dotted all around our town area. Rabimbuses at Five Corners, Riders on Orange Street, those I remember. I'm told that 60-something Orange Street was also a small convenience store. And Sheila Fee's Flock, of course, was the bake shop and so forth. That's an observation. And do we recommend, as Mary Longacre suggests, the loosening of the restriction that if a space had once held a convenience store, it might well hold it again, even if there has been an intervening period of a number of years.
I would be in favor of that, but I think we also have to consider parking in the area, because if it's in a residential zone and there is no parking, people will pull up onto the sidewalks or onto people's lawns, and as they do right now.
I think it would still need planning board review for being appropriate for the area. But
Yeah,
the idea
but I
was
agree.
to not prohibit it outright.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about businesses, we get into a gray area of home-oriented businesses. And I'm thinking in terms of lawyers, accountants, people who could easily work from their home and yet advertise a business. Will the chamber report tell us anything about them?
So the chamber report does distinguish between businesses that have a separate legal name, such as a corporation or LLC, and businesses that are just operated by an individual. So to some extent, yes, but that's not a perfect delineation. A business that is in practice operated by an individual can also have an official business name.
Yeah, we have hairdressers, dressmakers working out of their home.
I guess there's one subject that I forgot to mention too, and I know it's a really sore subject, but because we're in a densely populated area, the subject of investor-owned residences, I think it should be somewhere in our consideration because they essentially destroy neighborhoods, not just on Nantucket, but across the country, where investors are buying up whole neighborhoods and have complete control of those neighborhoods. And I think they can easily destroy the whole feeling of living in a neighborhood at all. So I don't know, it's certainly a topic for discussion and for possible consideration. And I realize there are a lot of legal ramifications and it does mean stepping on a lot of toes, but we already have instances of off-island investor-owned groups who never come to Nantucket, don't care about Nantucket. Profit is the only motive. And I think we should give that some consideration.
Well, it's certainly coming up at annual town meeting.
Well, they're calling it short-term rentals. It isn't just short-term rentals. It's not that at all. It's the idea of being owned by an investor, whether a single person or a group of investors who never come to Nantucket.
No, I understand, Marianne. Articles 39 and 42 are the town's attempt at defining short-term rental. Article 43, as proposed by Glidden, would be restrictive for non-residential owners of properties that would be offered for short-term rental. So yes, it will come up. Should that article be discussed? I'm sure it will be.
I like Marianne's distinction but there are, investor firms that are buying property for long-term rentals as well, but it's a different kind of participation in the community. and so I think focusing for purposes of our plan, focusing on investor-owned residences is appropriate. I wouldn't want to wade into short-term rentals because that's an activity. And, we all know how contentious that activity is, but I think there is a point to be made to separate the concept of short-term rental from the concept of investor-owned residences. I think that's a really important point. I'm glad you brought it up.
So how would you regulate that? I mean, you can't really prevent a corporation from buying property, can you? I mean, if they want to buy.
I think other towns are looking at this now from the legal standpoint.
Yeah.
So I just think it's something we should address. I don't know how far and wide this could go on Nantucket. And I think it's probably limited by the fact that we're surrounded by water. So we can't just keep building out, or else they'd be here already buying up as much as they possibly could, which is what they're doing in communities across the country. And it's destroying communities.
And it's not just about resort communities. These are regular neighborhoods. That's why it's so, insidious. It's regular people, regular neighborhoods, regular houses, not fancy houses, not resorts, not tourism. It's just people aren't able to buy in to a neighborhood where they may want to live because they are outbid by private equity or other corporate owners who are looking at this purely as an investment.
Well, I like the notion of of mentioning it as a concern. I'm not, I don't think anybody here knows how to solve the problem, but I think it's good to mention it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Speaking of zoning, another thing that Marcia and I had talked about in our housing segment was, it does relate to zoning, and that was to you mentioned height, issues, Marianne, and we talked about ground cover too. But one thing that we talked about was the width of a building relative to its current. I guess it would be side yard setbacks in residential areas. And then, the concern being that a lot of the downtown properties everybody's building, if they don't have room to go back, which is the normal place to add onto your house, they're adding onto their sides. And that changes the character of a lot of the historic houses. And it also changes the sort of the dense feeling of the streetscape. So, again, I'm not sure we have any solutions, but it's a concern that side yards are being filled with large additions. And on the Historic Structures Advisory Board, I see this. I've seen a number of them lately, just because people are wanting to add more volume to their houses. That's where they go. So that's probably more of a zoning thing, which I guess is under land use.
Are you suggesting that setbacks can be changed?
Well, they could be changed. I mean, of course, anything can change in terms of zoning. You have to get the town to agree to it. But there could be other, and I don't know what they are. There could be other ways to discourage building out to the sides within a certain distance of the street. I think that was the real concern, building almost parallel to the front of the house. That a new addition needs, a side addition should be set back a certain distance from the front facade.
I think it's 5 foot for the historic district. When we redid our kitchen, they actually came out and measured to the property line.
Side yard setback.
Yep.
It's 5 feet. Yep.
And we were on the same footprint as the old kitchen, but they were out there.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like HTC would be the place to address that.
The HTC should be, but they're not good at regulating. You know, they don't always necessarily look at everything. You know, but there's a number of things they've approved that HSAB has said, you know, recommended that they don't approve. So I think if it were a little more codified under zoning, that would be a little easier for them to control, rather than counting on them to consider it as an aesthetic concern rather than a zoning concern.
Anything else? Well, it's going to be a quick meeting.
Okay,
Those are the best kind.
Well, we're at half strength, so we're only half a
This
meeting.
is true.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have anything else they want to discuss?
Just a quick note, I think I may know why people were having trouble getting into the Zoom meetings. The Tuesday meetings are set up differently than the Friday meetings. So if you're trying to get into a Friday meeting using a Tuesday link, it's not going to work. So just for anybody who put this on their calendar, just know that there are two different invitations, one for Tuesdays and one for Fridays.
But ML has been doing a good job of sending out the link.
You're
It's
welcome.
very helpful.
okay,
Motion to adjourn.
4:42 PM.
So moved?
That was Mary. Is there a second?
Second.
Mickey, very good. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Okay.
good weekend.
Thank you. You
All
too.
right. Cheery bye.
Stop recording, Mary. And thank you.